Okay, so can you see my slides?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great.
Yes, I can.
Okay, good. So today we're just going to follow through with the last, I think they're the last 3 steps in developing your advocacy strategy. We would have covered some of the other steps that dealt with identifying your priorities, looking at identifying your targets and your partnerships, and the messages that you will want to deliver to those key targets. So now we'll take a look at the communications, and this one is going to be short because we have another module that focuses on developing a communication strategy. So it will cover a lot of this, but for completeness, we have a few slides on communication that we will go through. Now, after you've put all of your other elements together that we would have discussed in the last 2 sessions, then you need to start talking. So you would have identified who your stakeholders were, who your targets were, and then you need to determine exactly how you're going to approach them and what you want from each of those targets, and then how you're going to quote and deliver your messages to them for the purpose that you want. So for each of them, you want something to happen. Either you want them to do something. As a decision maker, you want them to make a decision with regards to a policy. If it's your the target that is likely to be impacted, then you want them to come on board and you want them to take action as well. So we're just going to go through some processes with regard to that. So coming up with the communications or your communication strategy, the way you're going to go about reaching those targets with different messages is going to be, it's all about coming up with the most effective approach for making your case. So therefore, the tone of your message or the tone and delivery of your message is going to be very important. So here, then we'll take a look at the tone of your message would likely to be either engaging. So you want to engage, for example, your allies, your active allies. You want to persuade. You can, those allies that you have that are passive. You may want to convince those who are neutral on the subject. And then you would want to monitor as well. So your passive opponents, you might want to monitor them to see how they switch in relation to your advocacy point that you're trying to get across. And then you neutralize, and these are in relation to your active opponents. So what this graphic shows is just exactly what I went through. So in terms of engaging, and again, we're talking about the tone of your message. You can deliver a message, but it's important to know exactly how you can win your targets over to your cause. So engaging, if your target is fully in favor of your position, then, and have a high interest level, then, for them, you just want to engage them, for them to come along, to partner with you, to help you, to reinforce your whole strategy. And also to get them to open doors in relation to some decision makers who may be difficult to reach, or influencers who may be difficult to reach. So you just want want your messages to be quite engaging with them. Then you may want to persuade. So this is where you have people who are interested, but they're not activating themselves one way or the other. And so for them, they may want to have their knowledge increased. So then you may want to target your message for that thing, so that you move them from that position of being passive to being an active ally as well. So if we're talking about convincing as the particular target that you want to convince is this is if the target is more or less sitting on the fence with regards to the issue and your advocacy goal that you're looking to put forward. So what you're looking to do there is to show them the relevance of the cause, the impact that it's likely to have, how it fits within a national agenda or even an international agenda. So these can include anywhere from the decision makers to your influencers, your public opinion leaders. Those are the people who you want to convince. And more often than not, these are the ones who you will want to have evidence. Your messages will definitely have to be evidence-based. I mean, all your messages should be, but maybe, in this case, you may want to be just a little bit over the top with backing up your message with statistics, etc. In terms of monitoring, this is in relation to your passive opponents. I remember from Friday, we mentioned that with your opponents, what you want to be able to do is to know what their position is, so that you can develop your counter arguments. But your entire advocacy, in terms of your actions, you don't necessarily want to spend a whole lot of time trying to convince them of anything or whatever. They're your opponents. Just know what they're about, where they're sitting in terms of the position, and how you can work around them. And if you find that it's difficult to do, then it may mean going back to the drawing board and recoaching your goals or coming up with a different priority. Because at the end of the day, you want to be effective. So in this case, with the monitoring, you may want to just devote a little time and effort just to monitor, especially if they happen to have any power or influence. Because again, you want to know exactly where they're sitting and how you may be able to win them over to your side, of seeing things from your perspective, and then turning them into strong allies as well. With regards to the active opponents, these are the ones that are very vocal in terms of being totally against the position that you're taking for whatever reason. The example that we gave on Friday was a case of the access to essential medicines. And clearly, pharmaceutical industries, et cetera, they're going to be the ones who are going to be very, very vocal and very, very against, because one of the things that you're likely to be advocating for in this case would be access to generic versions of a patented drug. So, they might see it they will see it as a way of, cutting into their profits. And so they're likely to be very active opponents. They're likely to have a lot of power as well in terms of their influence on the same decision makers that you would likely to be approaching with your advocacy focus. But the thing is not to engage yourself in any kind of mudslinging and accusations, etc. To just stick to your cause and find a way around these active opponents. And like I said, if it's a case where it's extremely difficult, there may be cause for you to relook your advocacy goal and see how you can recoach it in a way that can give you results and also get the impact that you're looking for. It might take a bit longer. It's not admission of not being able to achieve your goal, but it might just be one of those things that you can say is a tactical retreat while you're focused on something else, while you're trying to determine how best you can move forward around the roadblocks that are likely to be put up by these active opponents. So what you want to be able to do is to make your message very effective. So your content has to be clear, it has to be accurate. The language needs to be appropriate for the audience as well. Remember that for each target that you identify, that your message, even though you're going to have that primary message going through, then your secondary messages will have to target your particular audience at any given point in time. As well, keep the message positive, motivational. Yes, no. Okay, so I've muted that. Let's continue. Sorry. Right. Also keep your message solutions oriented. Use your approaches that are solutions oriented and have it backed with evidence. What are the statistics? As I said, how many men, how many women, how many children, how long has it been going on, whatever. Just try to get some stats, and these stats, as I said before, can come from primary data sources where you conduct interviews and surveys, and certainly it will come from secondary sources where you do your research to see what has been done on the particular subject. What you want to be able to do is to have enough information that you're comfortable and confident about delivering that message. Because once you're delivering the message, you're delivering your message to someone else, another entity, another group of people, and they will ask questions. So you need to be very, very careful. I think we have some more feedback that I need to mute. Yeah. So you need to be very careful. Sorry, you need to be very confident in that message that you're delivering. So you come across being sure, transparent, and comfortable. So let's take a look at an example here where your target is the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. You're dealing with AIDS-related deaths. What you want here, you've identified that what you want to do is the tone of your message. You want to be is a convincing tone. So what do is you identify the challenges, the action. This is what you want the particular target to do, and the results that you want, the overall impact. And if the two, if you both your organization and your target working together, then these are the results that are likely to be achieved. So in this case, if we take a look at the message, it says AIDS-related deaths among adolescents living with HIV are estimated to have increased by 50%. Here you have data. So you're identifying the challenge, you're backing it up. There's information. For the past 7 years, again, information. Right, and then you're doing a comparative as well. So that's always good. Then, despite being a vulnerable population, there are no significant targets to increase access and prevention and treatment amongst young people. And then it goes on to tie it into a global movement. A global movement that requires a national response. And so having identified early on that this is your priority, this is a problem, your root causes, etc. You've identified this challenge, and what you're wanting to do is to galvanize that national response to a global issue. Okay, and again, you see how that is very short. It's not 2 pages, 4 pages, not even 1 page. 1 paragraph, a couple of sentences that gets it across quite succinctly. The action. So you're basically saying here that as the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, you're asking them to encourage the government to actively support the cause. So that's what you want them to do. Okay, and then the results. You're basically saying that the country can build a stronger and more ambitious plan to reduce new HIV infections, etc. So here you have the challenge that has been identified, is evidence-based, and you're saying exactly what you want the target to do or what you expect from them, and then you're tying it in with an overall result in terms of the impact of how, working together, what you can legitimately achieve. So like I said, that's it for communication. We are going to have 2 more sessions on communication. So we're going to go into more details in how you identify those targets, how you deliver the kind of messages, etc. So now let's take a look at resources, because once you have identified your advocacy, you've outlined your advocacy strategy, then you need to be able to implement it. And to be able to implement it, you need resources. And not just financial resources, but you need to have other resources as well, which we will touch as we go along. So what you're actually doing with regards to these resources is that you need to undertake a realistic assessment of your existing capacities, the resources, and the gaps, as well as what are the potential sources of funding. So let's just go through it's just to also remember, as I said before, that your resources can both be tangible as well as intangible. So things like skills and motivation, reputation, human resources, etc., are all kind of things that you'll consider in terms of resources. So let's touch the first one. The obvious one is usually financial resources. Do we have the money in order to implement our strategy? And if we don't have the money, where can we get the money from? So when you're developing in terms of looking at your financial resources, how do you determine what it is that you need? Most of us are familiar with developing projects. And when we write our project proposals, we come up with a list of activities, and our budget then is based on those activities. It's usually the easiest, the simplest way of doing it. Once you've identified your actions, then you work out how much is it going to cost to undertake that particular activity, and then all the other things surrounding that. So activity-based budgeting is an approach that I think we're all most familiar with, and it's based on that detailed action plan that you would have developed as you were preparing your project, and in this case, your advocacy strategy. So key questions to ask in this case is, what money do you have available for the project? So you look at your own internal resources. Where is the money coming from? And if it's a large organization, you may have different budget lines, so you need to know where exactly the money is coming from. If it is a case where you're a small organization, say for example an environmental organization, you may, you're looking to determine where the money is likely to come from, and you look for the usual sources of funding in terms of environmental projects. The UNDP GEF Small Grants Program is one that is often used by environmental CSOs within the region. And I just pulled that out as an example. And then you need to know what is the budget, the indicative budget. You start out with a broad budget, and then you fine tune that budget as you go along. So when preparing your budget, then some of the things that you need to think about are the goals and objectives of your project, which activities contribute most to achieving your project's goals and objectives, what resources you need to implement your activities, what the resources will cost, and of course, ensuring that you allocate enough funds to support the resources that you have identified. So some of the things that typically we tend to put into our budgets or our budget lines, and this is not exhaustive by any way. You look at travel and per diems. If you're having a meeting, then the the venue for the rental of the venue for the meetings, if it's a conference or event that you're planning, the launch of your advocacy strategy, you know, you take those costs into consideration, what other resources and resource materials that you would need, and you really need to break it down. You know, do you need to have flip charts? Do you need to have multimedia, audiovisual aids, etc.? You need to consider those costs. Do you need to participate in any events, any international events, in order to further do your network? And of course, you include a contingency, and you look at your administrative costs. So, you know, in terms of your staff, office rental, electricity, etc. And if you're running several projects, then you need to know how to apportion your utility costs, for example, to your various projects. So what are some of the other resources that we're going to take a look at? We'll look at your human resources, your resources in terms of your partnerships that you would have established, information and knowledge, relationships, your reputation, and time. So regards to your human resources, what you're looking at here is who would be available to work on the different aspects of developing the advocacy strategy. Do they have the appropriate skills and the knowledge and experience in order to do it? Or do you need to partner with someone else? Or do you need to hire someone with those expertise who can come in and help and provide the kind of expertise that you require to develop your advocacy strategy in a particular area? Can you actually undertake training in order to make sure that you have the required skills and experience? In terms of your partners, then you need to know what would those partners actually deliver? Because earlier on in developing the advocacy strategy, you would have identified the people that you want to have working with you that kind of would complement those areas that you may be weak on, to kind of strengthen those areas that you may be weak on in, as well as to complement the areas that you have your areas of competency. So who are these partners, and how are they going to be involved, and what do you want them to deliver? So, for example, if you're partnering with a particular agency and you've identified in the budget that you need to have a meeting room space, maybe that particular agency will let you have, their contribution could be that you can have your meetings in their space. So that is what we mean by resources. So it's not only the financial resources that you're looking at, but you can see where your partners can actually fill the gap. If it's training that is required, maybe they have a competency in developing training programs. And so you work with them to develop your training program. Information and knowledge. So this is where you actually do the research in order to get the information, the knowledge, the statistics that you need to put the evidence to the message that you're delivering. So have you done enough of that? And then do you have any of your partners or persons in your network who can assist in providing that type of information for you, extracting that information from the various sources, and maybe even analyzing the information so that then you can use it in your report? What relationship do you have with your staff, volunteers, your partners? Those are going to be very interesting as well in terms of managing those relationships in order to give you the results that you're looking for. In terms of reputation, do you or your partners have a strong reputation among your target audience? Do they have a very public profile, a beneficial public profile that you can tap into? What kind of strategies are you going to develop in order to make this happen? And then is it any way that you can recruit those influencers that we spoke about last week to be your spokesperson? Someone who can to be a champion for the particular advocacy point that you're looking to bring across and action that you want to have implemented. And then in terms of time, a question that you want to ask is, do you have enough time to implement the project effectively? Because sometimes, you know, I often find that sometimes you're given a project to undertake, and for whatever reason, you might be given 4 weeks, 6 weeks, or 3 months, when in actual fact, you know, you do need, especially if you're liaising with other stakeholders, if you have to execute surveys and get information and interviews, then you need to give yourself that time in order to get it done. So do you actually have that time? Have you given the duration of the project enough time in order for that to happen? Bearing in mind as well that if you have accessed funding from an agency, that you do have to have that time at the end of the project to be able to deal with all the financial and administrative reporting and closing off the project. Are there particular deadlines that you have to meet? And this may be in terms of the example that we gave earlier, where there was a global initiative being undertaken, and you wanted to have at a national level, you wanted them to participate in that global initiative. Your timelines are going to depend on that global initiative and when it's going to be implemented and when it's going to close off. So you have to work within that time frame as well. Are there other external events that are likely to impact on the whole execution of the project, such as elections or political meetings or anything like that, international summits that are likely to impact? So those are the kind of things that you need to think about in terms of time. And really and truly, if I can just go back to one example, and this is in terms of elections, not to just to reinforce how important it is. I'm currently working on a project, and general elections have been called in that country, so everything has come to a standstill because the existing government is currently in a position of what we tend to call a caretaker government. So they're not going to be making any major decisions at all during the time from calling elections to actually having elections. So, you know, we basically have had to put the entire project on pause, or rather not we, but the entire project has been put on pause until elections. And then you need to go through the process of, if it's a new entity, new government, then you need to go through the whole process of making them aware of the project, and they need to decide if they're going to be continuing with the project, things like that. So those are things that can affect your timelines. And those are things that you need to take into consideration. Even something as simple as, you know, when you're working out in your budget and your timing, when you are going to be on ground or when you want your activities to occur, you know, just remember, pull up online or any official documents to find out when national holidays are going to be. Because you may very well plan something that will coincide with a national holiday, and then you need to just reconfigure, reschedule, and that can sometimes upset your timing. So in terms of the resources, these are the additional resources. So you think of financial resources, and then all of these other resources are going to be very important in terms of you determining your access to these resources and how you can best position those resources for your advocacy campaign. So the next step is your action plan or your roadmap. So this is about choosing your activities, and really and truly, you probably needed to do this this step should have been ordered before the communication. But bearing in mind that communication is something that goes on, even though it's noted as step 7, it is something that will go on throughout the project, because from the beginning, you'll start identifying your stakeholders and you need to be liaising with them. So developing your action plan is about choosing those activities and the actions and the tactics that you are going to use to implement your advocacy strategy. So key questions that you're going to be asking yourself are, what activities or tactics will you use? And then here are some. Again, this is not an exhaustive list, but it is things that we are familiar with. So some of your activities in terms of getting the message across, sensitizing stakeholders, sensitizing decision makers. These are some of the things that you're likely to undergo. So you're likely to you can have public panel discussion, what we may call town hall meetings, lobby meetings. You may send letters and emails, you may do petitions, certainly public service announcements, ads in the newspaper, using social media, looking at photography and film documentary of your particular advocacy issue, using blogs, press releases, and sometimes, depending on what is allowed at a national level, you may even do a public protest. So these are all kind of tactics that you can employ in terms of working towards implementing that strategy that you have. So what are some of the key questions? What activities and tactics are most appropriate for each target audience? Now remember again that it's not a one-size-fits-all when it comes to delivering not only your delivering the message and the communication methods, but also determining what tactic that you're going to use. So an email blast may work for one target audience, whereas public service announcements might work for another target audience, especially if it's a wide target audience. Does the activity fit with your chosen communication approach? So so if you've chosen to be engaging to deliver engaging messages in terms of communicating to a particular target, then the activity also has to fit within that message that you have chosen, your communication approach. Does it fit within does the activity fit within your overall advocacy method? In terms of your target, are you targeting the public sector, the private sector? Are you targeting other CSOs as well to get them on board with your cause? Are you acting safely within your current political environment? So again, that's an important consideration, as well as being realistic about the number of activities that you're undertaking. Now, it may sound very, very good to when you're developing your strategy. Remember last week I said when we were looking at objectives, we were looking at goals and objectives. We said that when you're developing your objectives to achieve your goal, not to be too expansive, just pick about 3, 4, 5 maximum objectives, because then each of those objectives are going to have activities. And then you need to make sure that the activities that you're coming up with are also realistic, because it can expand. So if each objective had, for example, you had 5 objectives and each of them had 10 activities, then you're looking to execute 50 activities. And remember that each of those activities, while you may broadly state them in your project proposal or your advocacy strategy, when you start to break the tasks down, then it multiplies. So just make sure that it is realistic, it is achievable, so that you can determine impact The most important thing to remember is that to keep the message and the purpose of your advocacy action at the forefront and not to be distracted. So, for example, you may decide that you are going to stage an event, or let's say a press release. So you develop your press release, you have a lot of your activities and a lot of your attention, a lot of your resources focused on having this press release. You execute that, and that is not the end of your advocacy. That is just one tool that you have used in order to advance your advocacy cause. So again, bear in mind what your overall objective is, what your overall goal is, and that these activities one by one are, as they are implemented, are to support that broader goal. So let's take a look at monitoring and evaluation. Are there any questions at this point from anyone?
No, I'm good so far.
Okay, great.
Yeah, so it's going clear.
Pardon?
It's clear. Everything is clear.
Okay, great. So the other thing that we need to take a look at is monitoring and evaluation. So you've gone through all the steps, you've had your advocacy strategy, and you've implemented your advocacy strategy. How do you monitor and evaluate various impacts? Monitor how you're progressing, etc. So monitoring and evaluation are important for keeping your entire initiative on track. You would have had, for your activities, you would have had time frames, you would have had milestones identified in your action plan. How are you in terms of keeping on track with regards to that? It allows you to assess the change that has achieved against your stated goal. So you'd have had your goal, you would have your objective. Are you actually, the changes, what changes have occurred? How far along are you in terms of, say, for example, you wanted to have, in order to influence a decision maker, you needed to mobilize a particular community. Were you able to mobilize that community? And having mobilized that community, what are the changes that have occurred? It also, as I said before, allows you to monitor your progress, allows you to recognize any risk and challenges that you may encounter so that you can address them as you are implementing your advocacy strategy. So it's like you do a monitoring, determine where you are, go back and check against your stated goal and objectives. Are those being met? If not, why? And then what do you need to change in terms of your approach? Okay, bear in mind that even though your strategy is written and you're following your strategy because it is your roadmap, that you would have planned it outside of your implementation framework. So having implemented, there are things that you will tweak. So don't be afraid to actually tweak it and make changes, and make sure that if you're dealing with a funded agency as well, that is built into the whole project that has been approved. Okay. The other thing that you want to do is to monitor your success, note what has been successful, and be able to document that and share that information with other people as well. So at the end of your implementation of your advocacy strategy, because they would have had a time frame, so you're coming to the end of that now, you've influenced your decision makers, you have a change in policy, or you've been able to sign on or ratified a particular treaty, then you have to carry out an evaluation. And it's usually a participatory approach that needs to be taken with regards to your team, as well as the stakeholders that you would have engaged with. And this is where you start to not only document the evidence and document the facts and stuff that comes out of that reporting, but also what were the experiences and the experiences that you can share. And that's going to be very, very important in terms of you being able to engage other stakeholders at some point in time in the future. So why is it important to monitor and evaluate your progress? That is to ensure that it goes on plan, that you reach your targeted goals and objectives, and you learn from your experience. And as well, I think for almost all funding agencies that you access funds from require it as accountability for the funds that you will receive from your donors. So you definitely need to go through this exercise. So let's break it down a bit. Evaluation. Evaluation is that periodical check-in that you do in terms of measuring the degree of success of your of the project. What it does is it questions the progress you've made towards achieving your goals. So it will measure your progress in terms of the activities executed, and then overall to the objective related to those activities, and then as it relates to your overall advocacy goal. What it does is that, as I said before, you not only would use it's not only a matter of just assessing internally how you have done, but also that evaluation, surveys are undertaken with the stakeholders as well to get their feedback. So your evaluation, whereas internally and on interim, as you go along in the project, you'll probably have internal evaluation. Certainly at the end of the project, you will need to engage the other stakeholders as well. Monitoring is about measuring the activities, checking whether the project is executed according to plan. And once you've gone through that process, as I said before, you use that information, and that information, data and information that you would have collected and analyzed will give you a very good idea of where you are and what possible changes you may need to make in order to successfully execute the strategy. Maybe there are no changes that need to be made, but more often than not, there's always some way that you can better go through the process. Bearing in mind that you didn't write the strategy from the position of, in hindsight, so to speak. You're always writing it from and saying, this is what we would want to achieve, and this is the plan to achieve that. But then things might crop up and you may need to make a few changes. So some of the key questions when it relates to, or rather, there are five essential questions for monitoring and evaluation planning. So what you wanted to be able to do is know who are the monitoring and evaluation users and how they're going to be using your monitoring and evaluation information that you've generated. What design should you use, what should be measured, and what are the tools that you're likely to use. So let's start with your users. Who will use their monitoring and evaluation tool? So, sorry, who will use the information generated when you go through your monitoring and evaluation? And how will they use it? So what you want to be able to do is to get clarity on these elements up front. This will ensure that the evaluation delivers the right kind of information that is needed. So once you've identified who is going to be using it, so one of your users, well, certainly a user will be yourself and your team and your CSO, but your donor agency will be using that information as well. So once you know who is going to be using, then you can determine exactly how you're going to go about getting the information that is required, the type of tools that you're going to use, etc. So some of your potential users, as I said, your organization, external donors, and your partners as well. They will be very interested in the information that is going to be generated. The next question that you ask really is, how will monitoring and evaluation be used? So normally, in terms of advocacy, monitoring and evaluation, it's usually done to establish three main things: accountability, to inform decision-making, and to encourage national or global learning. So it goes back again to what I said. The key things in terms of monitoring and evaluation is that you want to be able to provide the information that your users can use, but one key thing is to be able to document the lessons learned and to share that information as well. So it's not only about providing the financial report and the administrative report at the end of the project to the donor, but extract those lessons that have been learned. It's going to help you when next you go to develop another advocacy strategy, or just in your plain day-to-day operations of your CSO and how you interact with your partners. So accountability is really referring to being able to use the evaluation to examine whether a case can be made that an advocacy effort produces intended results. In terms of informing decision makers, that evidence, the evidence that is generated, so you would have gone to them and said, this is the challenge, this is the information that has been generated, this is a change that we want to have occur. And so now you're saying, okay, having gone through this process, here's the documented evidence of that change that had occurred. Okay, so again, that going through that monitoring and evaluation exercise produces that information that you can then use. So what evaluation design, and we're not going to go into evaluation design as part of this course, but it is important to know that there are different ways, their overall methodology that can be used in terms of information gathering. Okay, and some of those are, and I'll just state them. You can use an experimental approach, semi-experimental approach, or you can just use a non-experimental design where, when it comes to your evaluating your advocacy efforts. But more often than not, the monitoring evaluation is that you will come in, you will, certainly an external entity will come in, they will talk to the executing agency, which is your CSO in this case, just to find out exactly what it was that has been done. They'll review the reports, they'll assess what your challenges were, etc. They will also, so that might accompany a survey. So you might have a survey and an interview, and the same thing can happen for stakeholders as well. You're surveyed, you get an interview, either face-to-face, a focus group, or by a telephone call. I've had some monitoring evaluation experts who came in and they did a video documentary as well. So all those are methods or techniques that you can be used to get the information that you require. And then you have to analyze that information to see how you can move forward. And then the next one is what is this that should be measured? So you're looking at 4 particular aspects. So your activities. What are the results of the activities? Are the activities associated with your objectives? Were you able to achieve all those activities? At what stage in terms of monitoring, because you may have an midterm monitoring, an evaluation exercise, and a final monitoring evaluation exercise. So if it's a midterm exercise, then certainly you would take a look at the progress. So for a particular objective, where are you in terms of achieving the various activities? Are those activities, have they started? Are they in progress? Or have they been completed? So that is where you're looking at your activities. What they do is they measure the effort that has been undertaken to date, at whatever point the M&E is being done. Then you have the interim outcomes. These are the strategic results achieved between your activities and achieving the overall goal. And the other one, what did I say? I said activities, you have your interim outcomes, you have your goals, and again, that is what the advocacy strategy is aiming to accomplish. So has that goal been achieved? And you measure that again by going, if you want, you take a look at the activities, the progress that has been made in the activities, have the overall objective been met, and then taking a look at all of the objectives. So if you have 5 different types of objectives, how are you in terms of having achieved those objectives? Because then that will then determine whether your goal, your overall goal, is being met. And then you have your impact. Your impact signals what will happen after an advocacy goal has been achieved. So what are the changes that you were expecting? What are the benefits that you were expecting to your target community? Has that been achieved? Okay, what's the impact? Do you now have more women empowered to undertake a particular action that you were looking at? Do you now have greater access to generic drugs at a national level? Or is that backed up by specific legislation that has been impacted? So that's the kind of things that you're looking in terms of impact. Again, this will be evidence-based as well. You can certainly collect data, you can have your stats in order to analyze, to develop your report. And then the next one is what data collection tools are being used. And we talked about those before. Are you going to be using surveys? Are you going to be interviews? Primary research, secondary research? If you're going to be polling, focus group meetings, that kind of thing. How will the data be collected? So in terms of monitoring evaluation and some of those key questions, once you can answer those questions, you basically then have not only answered, once you can write them up, because most likely you'll be developing a monitoring and evaluation plan. And your monitoring and evaluation plan will have all these elements put together. And once you're able to answer those questions sequentially, then you'll be able to come up with a pretty good monitoring and evaluation report that you can then use for your different target audience, whether it's, as I said before, your organization, external donors, or your partners. You can sit down and engage them, talk about the next steps, look at the lessons learned, decide how you're going to share those lessons, and how you are going to be incorporating all this information in terms of your next steps. And if it's a midterm evaluation, then again, it helps you in deciding, in decision making as to whether or not you need to change anything in terms of your approach. So that's it as far as monitoring evaluation goes and the various steps that we went through. And that's it for the advocacy component of the course. As I said, the communication component was a little bit short because we will have the next set of sessions that you're going to have, I think, starting next week, will be focused on communication. Okay, so are there any questions from anyone?
No real questions pertaining to this, but I realized that I joined late. How soon would I be able to get the recording?
How soon would you be able to?
get the entire recording because I joined kind of late because I didn't realize we had a class today.
Oh, okay. We will see if we can get it up tomorrow. If not tomorrow, then certainly by Thursday. The PowerPoint presentations will be up tomorrow. And hopefully tomorrow, definitely by Thursday, I will have your next worksheet up as well. And that worksheet is going to, it takes you through the steps in developing your advocacy strategy. So you have already completed, I hope you have already completed the prioritizing your advocacy question, or your advocacy, I'm totally at a loss for words here. I'm sorry, not being very eloquent here, but coming out with your advocacy priority. That was worksheet 1. So what the next worksheet you will have would take you through all the steps that we went through the last couple of days, leading you to, once you go through those steps, then you're in essence developing your advocacy strategy. So that would be the next worksheet that we'll have posted. I just need to have some discussion with Erica about it and internally, and then we'll post that worksheet up.
Okay, no problem. Thank you very much.
Certainly by Thursday, you should be able to have the recording as well as the PowerPoint presentation.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Any other questions? No? Well, in that case, I want to thank you for turning up for the session, and also thank you for being present for the last was it three sessions. We actually had to have an extra session in order to cover all the details. So I hope it was clear. But if there are any questions, you can always post a question in the classroom, and we will certainly respond to your queries. I'm still trying to come up with a discussion topic, but hopefully by Thursday as well, I will have that posted.
Okay, all right, thank you.
For me, Wendy, but it was a really informative session. It was crystal clear for me, so thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, well, everybody have a very good, enjoy the rest of the evening and have a very good week.
All right, thanks again.